here are the lessons of all these various empires. The first is that they grow because there is a discontinuity in the market, in the kingdom or wherever they are. And they grow rapidly, and what causes their growth is an outward lookingness. They are very open to other ideas. And so if you see the Ming dynasty, they ran huge expeditions and ships all over the world. They came back with ideas from India, from Japan, from other places, and those enriched the Ming China. Ming incidentally means brilliant. So the Ming dynasty was a very brilliant period. So also in Akbar's time, anybody could come into this country, anybody could walk around, anybody could write travelogues. There were no restrictions on people. And Akbar's court, as historians have written it, had plenty of time to listen to new ideas and new ways of thinking. And Akbar's own personal characteristics, as described in history, was one of complete open-mindedness. King Suleiman the Magnificent in Ottoman Empire, they all have a similar sort of characteristic. And some of the things that you have said, Professor Yadav, about Professor Nabar, and I think Professor Joshi said something about the other leaders, suggest that you've also had, I'm not saying it's over, but I'm saying you also had leaders who have had that kind of a outlook. But with success, regrettably, people tend to continue to use proven techniques that had worked for them earlier. So what worked for you, you tend to look backward at your great days of glory, and you get your eye off what's in front of you. This is again no great, you don't need to do big research on this. But the guy who's missing the future because his mind is in the past doesn't realize it. If you look at some of the things that are happening in our national discourse, we are more interested whether artificial insemination was invented in the Mahabharata time than to figure out how to use technologies in the future. And these are symptoms. These are only symptoms where you need to celebrate what's ahead in the future rather than look in the past. And I have written a book, which is not the subject of what I'm going to talk today, that power actually damages your brain, physically, chemically, biochemically. And there's lots of evidence for that. So people get powerful, they get successful, it damages your brain. And once it damages your brain, it removes your ability to empathize on a human level. And that's the reason why the decline begins. That's the bug that gets into people's heads. And once that happens, you become behaviorally different. You become arrogant. You keep wagging your finger to everybody. You give the impression that you are the only one who knows what is happening. You give the impression that everybody in this world is a fool other than just two of you. And so on and so forth. This happens in companies, it happens in nations, it happens in societies, it happens in building societies, it happens in clubs. So it's not just, and it happens in education and research institutions as well. As a result of this arrogance, you start running into problems. And those problems start to eat up your self-perception of great glory in the past. And you become inward looking. Let's try to revive all our old traditions. Let's try to revive what has not been done for the last 70 years. Let's start doing it now. That kind of rubbish gets into the organization. And once it does, your decline starts. And in each of these empires that I described to you, their total life was about 250 years. The rise was 60 to 80 years. The decline was 120 years. And the most poignant example of this is that when 1857 happened, Indian princes needed to find a leader, and they went to the leader who was the least unacceptable, Bahadur Shah Zafar, when he had long ceased to be anything like a leader. And then history has now been written about it. So history is telling you something. And I made a presentation with PowerPoint charts. And my old professor at IIT, Professor G.S. Sanyal, said to me, you must come and talk to our students about this. And he came and sat in the first row. And I was very embarrassed that Professor Sanyal sat with a paper and a pencil and he was taking notes, sat in the front row. And when I asked him, he said, you used to sit in the front row and take notes when I gave lectures, so I'm giving you reciprocating. But he said, there's something very interesting that you have come out with. You described this parabolic, asymmetric parabola, but this is the same path that a rocket takes. A rocket takes off, then it loses as the gravitational force decreases, and then it starts to decline. And so they put booster rockets so that the shape of the parabola can change. So can companies and institutions have booster rockets, equivalents, so that their life is enlarged? And he said, I'll give you 2 MTech students. Please work out the mathematics of this. And I said, sir, it's long since I did maths. I have to advise you that I love you, but I don't remember anything of what you taught me. So with deep apologies, I turned down the opportunity to take 2 MTech students and guide them because I was totally incapable by this time. But you must understand why the decline is long and painful. People who are in decline don't realize they're in decline. It's only later on in history you can say that, oh my God, couldn't they see this happening? But it was happening. The quality of life in Bombay is declining. We all know it. Now, I'm not saying I have a solution, but all I'm saying is we cannot deny that it's happening. People are trying to booster rocket it by putting metro, underground, and all sorts of other things. The environment is declining. I mean, in the 20th century, the chemical industry was the most sexy technology. The number of PhDs, the number of patents, the number of Nobel Prize winners, the kinds of discoveries that helped mankind to improve its quality of life are all attributable to the chemical industry. Initially, the inorganic chemical industry, then the organic chemical industry, leading on to pharmaceuticals, textiles, and so on and so forth. But now it's a bad boy. If you say, I work in a chemical company, they may not give their daughter in marriage to your son because it's dirty. Hydrocarbons, coal are all bad boys. And try explaining to your children, they find it very difficult to accept chemical industry. That doesn't make chemistry bad. It just shows that there's a life and a cycle. I can tell you, in 30 years from now, computers and cell phones will be bad people. They will have cooked everybody's brains. The electronic waste that they generate will make that industry into the bad boys. And I'll be very surprised, I won't be alive at that time, but the younger people at the back will be alive. I can very well see that in 2030 or 2040, the electronic waste will reach a situation where the electronics and communication industry will be seen to be as much of a bad boy as the chemistry industry is today. So, these are the lessons of history, and therefore the message or the takeaway is to accept that, like the human body, your institution is declining, and you have to put in these booster rockets to transform the institution. So that leads me to the second part, which is, what are the lessons of longevity? It is interesting that biology was always considered to be a funny, spooky subject. I mean, chemists never accepted biology. It was, in fact, not even clear whether it was a science till 50 years ago. But the advances that have happened in biology and its influence on chemistry to biochemistry have brought it into the central position now. And you get all the lessons on longevity from live things. And I was very interested to read, for example, about the human immune system. I know we have a professor of pharmaceuticals and pharmacology, and I'm sticking my neck out. But even if I make a mistake, tell me quietly later, but don't announce it here. Our human body and our immune system is highly effective but hopelessly inefficient. We lead our lives thinking that efficiency and effectiveness are in the same vector. They are not. Sometimes they are absolutely the opposite. So if you look at your human body immune system, you'll find there's a lot of redundancy. In case that doesn't work, then this should work. If this doesn't work, that. Otherwise, we'll all be dead and gone. Because there are enough microbes and bacteria and other toxins that are waiting to get us. Diversity. If you didn't have diversity, your human immune system could not work. Modularity. You have in your body system subsets which are like a spare part, it put into action as soon as something fails in your system. Adaptation is the whole basis on which evolution happens. And adaptation means not only changing yourself, but combating challenges. So your body breaks into a fever, and once it breaks into a fever, you rest yourself, and then there is adaptation. Prudence. Nature, your body is not made for Rambo things. It's made for prudence. And finally, embeddedness, which really means it's harmonious with its nature and surroundings. These are the lessons of longevity. In Ayurveda, they say it in one way. In Western sort of language, they say it in a different way. But it's a common feature. So I said, if I apply this to companies and institutions, which is my subject of interest, what are the 5 lessons I can take for a long living institution? And this is for me the Brahma Mantra. And I am sharing this Brahma Mantra with you in the hope that I persuaded you to assume that there's decay going on, irrespective of how good you are. And if you want to arrest the decay through this booster rocket, these are the 5 areas you should look at. Once I tell you these 5 areas, you'll say, इसमें कौन सी बड़ी बात है? ये तो पहले से मालूम है. But I can tell you, from tomorrow morning for 1 week, observe how many times you forget it. Life's biggest mistakes are not made by new knowledge. It is made by awareness of old knowledge, which you've not just ignored. The first one is long living institutions have a consistent purpose. I'm not saying they have the same purpose, but they have a consistent purpose. And to give an illustration of a consistent purpose from the companies I have worked in, Unilever said in 1888, when the then founder was alive, what is your mission in your company? They said, our job is to clean the teeming millions all around the world. Now, his use of the word clean the teeming millions might sound a bit colonial, but Unilever is still doing that. They use different words for it, to make women beautiful, to make men healthy. But you're basically cleaning. Shampoo does that, and soap does that, and detergent does that, and even a beauty product. It cleans you up and makes you look good. Jamshedji Tata, these are my 2 heroes because I spent all my life there, said around the same time that the corporation is not separate from the community, it is a part of the community. And whatever we take from the community, we have to give back to the community. That's, long before CSR became mandatory. And Tatas are still doing the same thing. It's the world's largest charitable house. I use the word world's largest charitable house. I say it softly, not because it's a secret, not because I don't want you to know anything about it, but because the moment you say this, there are various forces that come into action in our political system that want to know more, and that may or may not be to your advantage.